I'm getting rid of this. It's way too loud, and the machine doesn't even really get that hot. So, yeah, this is way too loud. I mean, did I really think a 0.3 amp fan was going to somehow be quiet? No, this is supposed to go on a heatsink. So this is part 2 in our Gateway GP7 series. Check out the last video if you want to see the restoration of like doing the retro bright and the optical drives not working, and me breaking the CPU. Now currently this system has a 1 GHz Pentium III in it. However, it's supposed to have a 733 MHz Pentium III. However, as you can see, yeah, the heatsink installation didn't go well, so it's the first time for everything, I guess. Anyways, I put up a poll. You guys told me to put in a 1 GHz Pentium III instead. However, the buying a replacement 733 option was not that far behind, and I already bought it. The 1 GHz is still winning out, but guess what? I don't care. We're gonna put in the 733 because that's what I wanted. I didn't really want another 1 GHz class Pentium III system. I already have those. I wanted something kind of more mid-range. That was kind of the whole reason I really wanted to restore this system. And of course, I just wanted to, save the system in general, not let it, sit incomplete and just yellow and nasty forever. But, I wanted to at least have it to occasionally mess around with it, I suppose. So here's our replacement chip. I even bought the same stepping. So it's 1.65 volts. Some of these are 1.7 volts, so this should run even cooler. Probably has better overclocking potential, not that we could do that on this board, but if it wasn't a dumb Intel desktop board, we could do that. Unfortunately, due to the case design, we got to take the power supply out. So much easier. Nice. Get this cleaned up. Just noticed the thermal paste is like cracking. Yeah, I never said this was a good paste. Didn't hear any crunching sounds or anything, so hopefully that's successful this time. All right, I was just gonna test the machine basically completely stock to see the gaming performance, but we already kind of know what it's like. It's not very good, mainly because of the RAM. Like, it can't even complete 3D Mark, and performance and other stuff is also just really bad. A lot of that is the Intel integrated graphics, but I think a lot of it is the RAM. Only having 64 megabytes really sucks, and I don't think we're gonna learn all that much about what the system can do by leaving only 64 megabytes of RAM in there. And I don't think we're gonna really be able to see like what the Intel graphics would do as like a good comparison against the GPU that we're gonna put in. And honestly, the performance between the 733 and the 1 GHz would probably be indistinguishable anyways. There's no point in even comparing the 1 GHz to the 733 that the state of the machine's in. So we're upgrading the RAM. I should have thought of this before I put the power supply back in, but yeah, so this is the RAM that was in there. At least I believe this is the stock RAM. It might not be, but it's at least accurate to the advertisement that we found that showed off this machine. So this is two 32 megabyte sticks of PC100. So even though we have a 133 megahertz bus, the RAM is only running at 100 megahertz. And on top of that, we only have 64 megabytes. Really not a great combo. So we're just gonna pop in this stick of Century. Yeah, this is a 256 megabyte PC133 RAM. I don't know anything else about it. I think that's Hyundai RAM. Now, this being a Intel 810 board, I believe it's limited to 512 megabytes. Not that there's any reason to put that much RAM in this system. Just, it is just something to keep in mind. But yeah, doing a RAM upgrade would probably been the first upgrade I would have did if I was, if I was like stuck with this machine back in the day, before I would even consider doing a GPU or CPU, anything. Because while Windows 98 and like browsing the internet and stuff is usable on 64 megabytes, playing games, as like I've said before, really isn't a good experience. And hopefully we can actually complete some proper benchmarks with the Intel graphics just to see what it's capable of, because I've never really messed around with first-gen Intel integrated graphics before. It's just the opportunities just never come up, so I'm kind of interested to see what it can do, although I know it's gonna suck. It's just gonna suck. I really thought that the extra RAM would actually, you know, help out the Intel graphics, and that maybe this time we'd actually be able to complete 3D Mark, because we couldn't before. And no, the RAM didn't actually help. 3D Mark 99 still crashed. 3D Mark 2000, though, I noticed had this weird texturing thing going on. I don't recall if that happened on the 64 megabytes of RAM or not, and it still crashed. Then I had the idea, oh, yeah, the Intel graphics driver is probably just, like, really out of date. And I double-checked it, and yeah, it was from, like, 99. So I managed to find what I think is the latest Intel graphics driver from, like, 2002. At least that's the most recent one that I could find. And after installing it, yeah, 3D Mark 99 actually was able to complete the whole way. 3D Mark 2000 also could complete the whole way, and it didn't have that texturing thing anymore. Unfortunately, even with the newer driver, there doesn't seem to still be a way to allocate how much RAM the iGPU gets to use. There's no option in the BIOS for it, and both the older and the newer driver don't seem to have an option for it, so I guess it just takes up whatever RAM it wants. So I have no clue how much VRAM it actually has available to it, presumably whatever it feels like. 3D Mark 99 actually did okay. It did a little bit better than I honestly expected it to. If I had to put it in like a time period, I'd say the performance is probably around like a 1998 era video card. That seems to kind of be where the performance is roughly. 3D Mark 2000 is, yeah, it was pretty bad. That's not really surprising. Quake 3 at just the default settings, so that is like 640 by 480. I think some of the stuff is set to high. Whatever. I could reduce the graphics and get it to run a little better on the Intel graphics, but it would improve it, but like by how much realistically? It's not really playable. I mean, if you were at a LAN party and you were playing on a machine like this, yeah, you probably are not going to be doing very well. GL Quake, even at like 640 by 480, somehow did really badly. Like, it didn't even get to like 50 FPS. I have no idea why it's performing so bad. I don't know if the driver is just unoptimized for it, or if just the GPU in general is just not optimized really at all, which wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, I really thought GL Quake would do better than this, and I wasn't even going to test it originally, because I figured, oh, it's probably fine now, especially with the newer drivers, but nope, it's still bad. Unreal Tournament, I ran it at like 640 by 480 with medium settings, running the UT benchmark. I'm kind of thinking I probably should have used a different benchmarking demo, because this one seems to be really heavy on CPU usage, and the Intel graphics actually managed an average of 25 FPS, which was really surprising. I didn't expect the graphics to do that well at all, but 25 FPS sounds about right for the slower CPU that I have, because on like a 1 gigahertz Pentium III, can usually get closer to like a 30-something average FPS on this benchmark. And I did think about testing Serious Sam, but I don't have a disk for that, and I really didn't feel like trying to get the GOG version to work, so I figured I'd throw in Pod Racer here. It did okay. It was getting kind of around 30 FPS, so it's not bad. It's certainly a lot better than the N64 version, that's for sure. I would have tested more games, but I figured, are we really going to learn anything by testing more games on the Intel graphics? We know it's bad. People have done a lot of videos on the performance before. Of course it's bad. I do kind of want to go back and test how it would have been with the newer drivers, but with the 64 megabytes of RAM, just to see the machine is absolute stock. But I know it's just going to be even worse from a gameplay perspective, so I don't think that's really necessary. Besides, we're not doing some sort of like super scientific testing here. This is just basically a bonus project as part of the Gateway restoration. So the Intel graphics suck. That's not really much of a revelation. You'll also notice that the optical drive has changed again. I absolutely hate dealing with IDE CD-ROM drives. I don't know why. I've said this before. Every IDE CD-ROM drive I've ever had just doesn't work. It just stops working after a certain point. It's just so annoying. All the SATA ones work fine, I don't have a single dead SATA drive. Every IDE one fails. Just guaranteed. So we got this one in here. It looks even worse, because of course it does. It's some Sony CDRW drive. And that's just what we're dealing with. It's not even screwed in, because I don't care at this point. Now I put up a poll on what GPU you guys wanted me to put in here, and I was hoping this one would win, and thankfully it did. We're going to be going with a PCI, of course, because there's no AGP in the system. GeForce 2 MX400. Now this one's actually an EVGA model. That's neat. It even has 64 megabytes of RAM. Now, unfortunately, I did check this out. This is a 64-bit bus. However, I compared it against my AGP MX400, which is some MSI-made card. The AGP version has a 128-bit bus with, I think, 166 megahertz RAM, something around there. However, it's SDR memory. This is 64-bit, but this has DDR memory. So with the clock speed reduction, this still has less memory bandwidth, but it's not quite as bad as you would expect being a 64-bit version of a 128-bit card. I don't think the performance is going to be terribly bad in terms of the actual, like, what the GPU can produce. It's going to all come down to PCI being the main bottleneck. Now, I saw some people asking, like, oh, you should take the modem out because it's going to eat up PCI resources. Yes, but I don't think it's really going to eat up that much. I mean, we got the Ethernet card in there, not that I'm using it, but I don't think that's going to really eat up that much bandwidth, especially when it's, not being used. Also, I have my own kind of like homemade dial-up setup, so I don't really want to get rid of modems in my systems anymore, just because I can use that, and it's nice to have there. I don't really want to take it out. Plus, I mean, there's other stuff that's going to be using the PCI bus, We have anything plugged in through USB. That's going to be hooked up through PCI. Audio, same thing. It's going to be hooked up over PCI. That's just how all this stuff was wired up back then. I mean, I really doubt that the sound would be like hooked up through ISA. That doesn't make any sense. Yeah, just everything basically on the chipset back then, or, integrated audio and whatnot, was going to be hooked up through PCI. So if you have a PCI only system, it just kind of sucks. You kind of just got to contend with the fact that you're not going to be getting full PCI bandwidth even if you really wanted to. And I mean, still, you're dealing with PCI, which is still less optimized and slower than AGP is for graphics. So now I do have faster PCI cards than this. However, I don't feel like recapping any of them because I have a 64-bit GeForce 4 MX440, which in all honesty, I don't think is really going to be any faster than this. That needs to be recapped. And I also have a GeForce 6200, which is, I think, the latest PCI card that has Windows 98 drivers. And that's actually probably the best option if you wanted to actually try and use. If you wanted to actually try and upgrade this machine for whatever reason to actually play games on, like I said, this is kind of just a fun experiment kind of system to just kind of have around for me. I'm not going to actually be seriously gaming on this very much. Yeah, that would be the card I would recommend because it's going to be the fastest card you have. I should probably plug the CD audio back in. It's going to be the fastest card that's going to work with Windows 98. I don't think they're terribly expensive. You can probably get one for under 30, maybe 40 bucks. And that's just the problem with all PCI cards, is that they're just unreasonably expensive for what you're getting out of them. Which is why I don't recommend anybody actually try to upgrade PCI-only systems like this. Just try and go for AGP if you can. I also saw some people saying, oh, why don't you just get a Voodoo 3 PCI? You have any idea how much those cost? No, I am not paying like $150 for a Voodoo 3 PCI. Never. I'm lucky I have AGP Voodoo 3s. So I'm lucky enough in that regard. So unless you're going to buy me a PCI Voodoo 3, that's never happening on the channel. For the GeForce 2, I'm using driver version 8.05, which I think is the earliest version that supports the MX400. Of course, both 3D Marks perform way better than the Intel graphics, even dealing with, PCI bus limitation. 3D Mark 99 isn't exactly spectacular in terms of the score. Like an AGP MX400 should be performing a lot better than this. 3D Mark 2000, same deal. A lot better than the Intel graphics, but not as good as it could be. Now, I did actually go ahead and test the AGP version of this card and the PCI version, both on my 1.26 gigahertz Tualatin Pentium III machine, and the performance difference actually wasn't quite as big as I thought it would be, but this will give you kind of an idea of what the performance loss is and what an AGP version should be performing like. Quake 3, it's still the stock 640 by 480 settings, was able to hit 60 FPS average, so that's pretty nice. I did try bumping it up to 800 by 600 just to see what it was like, and that kind of dropped it down to the high 40s. The higher resolution certainly would be nice, but personally, I would rather take the frame rate. Just, a higher resolution would be nice, but considering we are dealing with a PCI card, and the card has a slower memory bus, performance is kind of to be expected like this. GL Quake actually flies on this system, which I think really goes to show how bad the Intel graphics are at this game. Yeah, it was over 100 FPS. This is at 640 by 480, but you could comfortably raise the resolution up and it would be no issue. Unreal Tournament, yeah, the CPU is definitely coming into play here. It still was averaging about 25 FPS. So this is a case where the faster CPU actually would help out. But again, like I said, this demo file is extremely demanding on the CPU. It's really more of a CPU stress test than it is a GPU stress test, but I really should just record my own demo file at some point to use for benchmarking on like a, not super complex map with only like, a few bots or something like that. And Pod Racer, I think I forgot to mention this last time, but it's running at 640 by 480. So it was getting way over 60 FPS, so it's performing very well. It is a lot more playable, a lot nicer experience. So the system now can do gaming. It's certainly possible. It's not the most ideal gaming experience, but you can play most Windows 98 games on this at lower settings and you'd be fine. Yeah, I don't know if I'd really recommend doing this. Well, that's it. I don't have anything else to do with the computer. It actually is not the worst gaming system. It's not amazing, but it's not terrible. So, there's that. I don't really have anything else I want to do with the computer for the time being. It might show up on the channel again at some point, but as of now, it's done in my eyes. I do have a couple other computers, sort of in a similar vein, that do need restoration. And I have one that's much older than this that I really need to get to. Yeah, the response to the first restoration video seemed to go pretty well, so I'm going to keep doing a few of these here and there. Got some other projects I want to do, though. Won't be back-to-back restorations. I'm not going to, burn me or you out on them, so yeah, thank you guys for watching. Stick around for the next videos. I should have a bigger project coming up, hopefully pretty soon. So yeah, I'll see you guys then. I am so tired of dealing with optical drives at this point. So I decided to, after the recording and everything was done, to mess around with seeing if I could try to get some of the other optical drives I had already tested working. I decided to change out the IDE cable just in case, maybe, but somehow the combination of different cable and now this optical drive, it works perfectly now. The Samsung drive doesn't work though with the new cable. Neither does the Plex Store, so we're still out on both original drives. I'm getting to the point where I really hate dealing with optical drives at this point. It's just so annoying. That's it. I have nothing further to add. I'm just upset.